Since the assassination of Charlie Kirk last week in Utah, the partisan fireworks have been flying in both directions, unfortunately. I will reiterate the position I took initially on hearing of that. It's it's awful. The cold-blooded murder of a man cannot be justified. Um, because if it is, if that is to be justified, then it really gets us into a dystopian situation where anything goes. That is to say that people can then just say, I don't like this person's opinions, so I'm going to kill them. So that's my position on that act. Murder's wrong. And I hope the perpetrator is punished for what he done. Um, but I also have a problem with the right wing distortion that's been coming out from it. Now, I'm not going to just repeat everything I said because I want to address a piece in the Times today, the London Times. But I do think there's a lot of right wing distortion. For example, when Trump claimed that Kirk was universally loved, that's simply not true. And I do not like this narrative that everyone should eulogize Charlie Kirk because he happened to die violently. That's a bit like saying George Floyd should be eulogized by everyone because he happened to die violently. And I think that would be an unreasonable position. For instance, I was against the idea of putting up a mural to George Floyd in Manchester. I think it was highly inappropriate. But the right are absolutely distorting a lot of this. Some of the stuff they're coming out with, blaming the left in general, despite the fact that leading Democrat politicians have clearly condemned this murder. From Bernie Sanders to Gavin Newsom, across the board, it's been condemned. And yes, there are some on the left who have gloated about it. I don't think that's responsible and I don't agree with it. But I'm just going to read out the sort of distortion that's going on and the sinister response of some of Charlie Kirk's followers. Because this isn't like, in light of this awful tragedy, let's come together, let's speak out against hate. No, it's all about vengeance. So I'm just going to read, this is from the London Times today, the 15th of September. This piece is by Mark Selman. Our website, dubbed Charlie's Murderers, has been set up to identify those who appeared to revel in the death of Charlie Kirk. It has listed the names, locations and occupations of people whose social media posts apparently mock Kirk or support the murder in what it calls the largest firing operation in history. It has named a teacher and transportation driver among dozens of people so far and claims to have 50,000 identities. The first person listed was Rachel Gilmore, a Canadian freelance journalist who said she had received death and rape threats. I'll repeat that, death and rape threats. As a result, despite one of her posts saying, I don't believe violence is the answer. It makes everything worse. I hope Charlie Kirk survives. That's what she said. Quinn Huddleston told Wired magazine that his post, highlighted by the website, was made prior to Kirk passing, and now, as radicals usually do, they spin it to work for their agenda, whatever that may be. The site's X account said it is a long-term endeavour to profile left-wing radicals permanently and create consequences for their networks. Those sacked include Matthew Dowd, an MSNBC political analyst named by President Trump, a Tennessee University employee whose posts were flagged by the state senator, and a teacher named by South Carolina Congresswoman. DC Comics has cancelled the series Red Hood after its author, Gretchen Felker Martin, posted, Hope the bullet's okay. That's a stupid thing to say, and it is in bad taste. But I will once again call it right-wing hypocrisy. All this moral outrage that they're coming out with, they didn't have a damn thing to say when left-wing politicians were violently attacked. And I think it's legitimate to call out that hypocrisy. As for, publishing people's names, locations, occupations, names and occupations maybe, locations, that could be construed as inciting violence. For example, if it's posting their home addresses, what's that in aid of? So that an angry bunch of Charlie Kirk supporters can go and harass them? It's very clearly inciting vengeance. Should it not suffice to just say this is in bad taste, and left wing extremists are, why not just criticize them? But Kirk himself advocated the harassment of academics. Kirk was not a moderate. He was not a moderate, and to say that he was is just disingenuous. Now, regarding the shooter himself, there's a lot going around. Once again, I mentioned fireworks. There's a lot going around about what his ideology was. I'm just going to read out this piece. This is what I'm reading, incidentally, just in case anyone's wondering. It's in today's London Times, and this piece is by Will Pavia in New York. The man suspected of shooting Charlie Kirk was in a relationship with a flatmate who is transitioning from male to female, the governor of Utah has said. The suspect, Tyler Robinson, 22, has not confessed to the murder or the influential conservative activist, but his flatmate is cooperating with investigators, Spencer Cox said. Kirk was shot dead while speaking to 3,000 people at Utah Valley University on Wednesday, moments after he was asked by one of the crowd how many transgender Americans have been mass shooters over the last 10 years. Too many, replied Kirk, who had been an outspoken critic of transgender rights and who declared on social media last month that it should be legal to burn a rainbow or Black Lives Matter flag in public. I don't know who that was that shouted that out, whether it was Robinson himself or someone else. It's not clear. The possible motives of the suspect have been the subject of fierce debate. Many, including President Trump, have framed the killing as an act inspired by a radical left worldview. Trump, of course, doesn't bother looking for facts. He just throws things out, like he done with the Potomac aviation disaster earlier this year. Others have compared cryptic messages left on the bullet casings to phrases used by a young man who killed 10 black people in a grocery store in Buffalo in 2022 and by a man who killed 51 people in 2 mosques in New Zealand in 2019, suggesting the messages could belong to someone from the far right. Cox has said the suspect had a leftist worldview. He told ABC News that Robinson came from a conservative family, adding, but his ideology was very different from his family. He said, we do know the roommate is a boyfriend of the suspect who is transitioning from male to female. I will say that person is very cooperative with the authorities. He said the flatmate did not have any knowledge of the shooting and was shocked when they found out. The flatmate, no doubt, will be now under threat from Kirk supporters. I have no doubt about that. Because they are inciting, calls for vengeance. It's pretty clear that they're doing that. And it's just a cycle. Cox described the suspect as an extremely bright student who dropped out of Utah State University and moved back to southern Utah. He blamed dark places on the internet for Robinson's alleged radicalization. I can't emphasize enough the damage that social media and the internet is doing to us. These companies, trillion-dollar market caps, have figured out how to hack our brains, get us addicted to outrage. Cox said that after the shooting, Robinson chatted with friends online who said he looked rather like the suspect and joked that it was him. The suspect wrote in Discord, a messaging platform, that Stoppelganger was trying to get me in trouble, according to the New York Times. Another member of the group suggested that they should turn him in for the reward. Only if I get a cut, Robinson replied, the newspaper reported. Robinson was said to have agreed with another user who quipped that he should avoid eating at McDonald's in the near future, an apparent reference to Luigi Mangione, who is accused of the murder of the chief executive of a health insurance company and was arrested in the New Jersey branch. To suggest that the president would send in the National Guard, Robinson is said to have replied, in a red state, nah, clearly the shooter was from California. The website Axios said Robinson's flatmate was aghast at the killing and immediately handed over all messages from the suspect. An electrician who said he worked with Robinson at an electrical company in 2023 told the New York Post that he was quiet but did speak up during the discussion about guns. Tyler said he had made a 450-yard shot. He said he got excited about it, at least as excited as anyone as he can get. He never showed much emotion. Given the suspect was not cooperating, Cox said evidence on his alleged motivation was coming from those who knew him, including family. This, along with forensic evidence, will be presented in charging documents tomorrow. Well, this is a little bit like the shooter in Butler. The ideology is just not that clear. It could be that this is a young person who's deeply confused. You know, um, if they were in these sort of dark places on the web, and if he was in a relationship with a transgender roommate, there may be a lot of issues there about self-identity. Who knows? But this isn't stopping, Charlie Kirk supporters from coming out and blaming the entire left. Now, some of those people, I think there are some people on the left making tasteless jokes and so on. I know that Bob Villan attracted controversy earlier this year for calling for the death of IDF soldiers, has come out, and now there's calls from the right to boycott their concerts. It's funny that the right's all about free speech when it's right-wingers inciting violence, like Lucy Connolly. But when it's left-wingers inciting violence or even stating their dislike of someone, then they need to be shut down. So again, I think the right are very hypocritical on the free speech issue. But this website, Charlie's murderers, what's their intention? Are they going to retract the fact that they have now caused a woman to face rape and death threats? This is why I'm very, very wary of personality cults. And unfortunately, when someone is murdered, they get martyrized. So if the assassin thought he was doing a good thing, it was utterly delusional, because he's turned Charlie Kirk into a hero. I don't think Charlie Kirk deserves to be a hero, actually. I don't think he was a good person. I think he was a MAGA extremist. But that's the thing. He's been turned into a hero, and just because someone has obnoxious views doesn't mean they deserve to be murdered. But there's a lot of right-wingers I've noticed who are distorting this. They're sort of implying that if people didn't like Charlie Kirk, that's somehow the same as being okay with his murder. Those who have been, condoning his murder or making sick jokes about it aren't exactly mainstream figures. Every mainstream left-wing figure, every leading Democrat politician, including Bernie Sanders, who's well on the left, have explicitly condemned the murder. So why are these right-wingers trying to blame all left-wingers? Why are they trying to fuel the partisan flames? It would be a bit like if a left-wing figure was killed, then blaming everyone who's a conservative. So it's dangerous, and unfortunately this cycle just continues. Reason is thrown out the window, it's partisan extremism. This is why I really, really don't like the level of partisanship that we're seeing. It's just causing no end of problems. So we see it in the UK as well, to a lesser extent, whereby you get this partisan mudslinging to such an extent that there's just a lack of critical thinking. So anyone who questions Unite the Kingdom rally must be a leftist. And yeah, there's some left-wingers saying that it was a bunch of fascists. That's also wrong. But anyway, I'll just leave this here. I just think it's I think that website is being very irresponsible. Charlie's murderers. Well, so my challenge to them is: are you seriously saying that everyone who disagreed with Charlie Kirk is responsible for his murder? Well, then you better be damn sure that you take responsibility when there's right-wing violence, of which there has been a lot. That's another narrative that we're hearing, that all the violence is coming from the left. That is not true. There's been plenty of violence from the right. And incidentally, Kirk's views on gun control, the shooter may have been a leftist, but clearly he agreed with Kirk on gun control, because clearly, to be a gun nut, he would have been against gun control. So that's more in keeping with Kirk's ideology. I still think that it's ironic and tragic that he was killed by his own extreme views on, perhaps if there had been tougher gun laws in Utah, this mentally unstable 22-year-old couldn't have got easy access to a firearm. It's worth considering. And then Charlie Kirk wouldn't have been killed. It's not his fault that he was killed. You can never blame a murder victim for their own murder. The murderer is always responsible for the murder. That goes without saying. But let's just stop this false narrative that Charlie Kirk was a wonderful, decent person loved by all. He wasn't. Secondly, This stopped the vilification of the entire left, because it may have been a left-wing figure who killed him, and because some left-wing people are making tasteless jokes about it. And let's be more consistent. So if you're on the conservative side of things, by all means criticise the tasteless jokes, but just make sure that you're being consistent and condemning right-wing tasteless jokes when there's violence coming from the right. I don't know how you can be morally outraged by one side but be okay when the other side, or when your side is doing it. I'll leave it there.